Hey guys, welcome to another episode of About Time with Michael. I have a super special guest. I do not want to muck up this intro. He is probably one of the most important people in South Australia, especially if you fall off your motorbike. I have Dr. Orso Lorenzo Osti. He's an experienced orthopedic and spinal surgeon based in Adelaide, South Australia. The gentleman was born in Genoa, Italy on July 22nd, 1956, which makes him a very young man. He holds a dual Australian and Italian nationality and citizenship. He has been practicing in Adelaide since 1993, specialising in the assessment of surgical management and of spinal disorders. He's also got some beautiful watches that he's brought along tonight, including a really rare Submariner. So, lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure.
I've heard so much about you. I've heard so much about your family. Can we start at the beginning and tell me a little bit about Dad?
Right. I thought Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve.
Adam and
Let's
Eve.
go a few thousand years further.
We'll skip some
my late father, his name, for the non-Italian, or apparently the world is divided in two categories, the Italians and the ones that want to be Italian.
That's right.
So for the ones that want to be Italian, Orso means bear, okay? So it's a very unusual name for an Italian. And it's even more unusual, obviously, in Australia. So when I order a coffee in the morning, I call myself Max, because I'm sick and tired of having to spell my name and the O-R-S-O.
The alias, Max.
So I'm Max, okay? Also Max. So even when you do on the dating apps, so I use Max. But we leave the dating apps on the side. So the issue with my late father is that his name was Gian Lupo. Lupo in Italian means wolf. So we grew up in a family of animals. My late father was Gian Lupo. I had a brother, my youngest brother, Mattia Falchetto, Little Hawk. Then my eldest brother, Hannibal, and so on. The only Christian, the only creature in our family with a Christian name was a dog. So I have a picture of this beautiful black Labrador called Antonio. Antonio. Okay, everyone else it was the joke in my school, but luckily enough, I was always a bit strong and bully, and so they were very careful not to.
But how beautiful is that to have all named after?
My background is colourful, so yes, I can entertain people for hours with my family history. So. My late father, Gian Lupo, was a highly intelligent. I'm very close to me, so I'm
Chip
biased.
Off the old block?
Yeah, chip off the old block. A very intelligent, highly educated, a very clever man. He was quite a rebellious young man, and so his father, my late grandfather, Harry, sent him to Germany in the 1930s because he finished his high school very young, like at the age of 16. So he was sent to Heidelberg, that was then like a university hub in Germany. We're talking about Germany in the 1930s, so under the Nazis.
Anti-Nazi rule.
And I think he got indoctrinated, definitely. So he did volunteer at the beginning of the war. He fought as an officer in the regular army and in the Eastern Front. Never talked about it. Was decorated. Decorated. Well, like with various German decorations and so on. When Greece was occupied, so the Italians tried to invade Greece. They failed, so they had to be bailed out by the Germans, and so eventually Greece was occupied by the Italians, mainly, but with the Germans controlling the main, like Athens, Thessalonica, and so on. And my late father was then sent to Greece as a link officer between the Italian and German army, being obviously Italian, but with the German thing and speaking fluent German. And when the war ended, when the Italians surrendered in September 1943, which is another incredible story how that happened, he was a link officer in Athens, I think, with the I think at the time would have worn an Italian uniform, but he was basically with the Germans. And so his German friends, because he obviously was very close, he had him fought in the most gruesome Eastern Front, if you're looking at Gaza, I tell you, it would have been worse than Gaza.
Yeah, of course.
The number of casualties, especially on the Russian side, they said about 20 million Russians died.
Yeah.
And the population of Russia would have been a fraction of what it is now. So it was a war of extermination, really ethnic cleansing at the highest level. He was expected to continue to fight with the Germans. He said he had enough, that his king, the Italian king, had said no. So he was arrested by his German friends and spent, a year and a half until May 1945 in prisoner of war camps. Luckily enough, he was moved because, as you know, Europe was occupied by the Germans, the whole of Europe. And so initially, probably the prisoner of war camps would have been with what now is probably Belarus or Poland. And gradually, as the Red Army kept advancing westward, these prisoner of war camps were moved further west. He was extremely lucky because he was then freed by the Canadian army in Holland. Holland was the last piece of Europe that was actually freed from German occupation. That was long after Hitler had died. So we're talking May 1945. But thank God he was freed. Well, thank God for him, obviously, or maybe for me, because otherwise I wouldn't have been born. He was freed by the Canadians rather than by the Russians, because had he been, he would have been killed
straight away. Does he ever talk about that, the prisoner of war or anything?
He talked about Greece, because I think it was a holiday for him following the Russian experience. And so he talked about a few anecdotes, more like fun. And if you're interested, I can tell you one anecdote, because obviously we remember. It was because they were always short of food, okay? And so he would, being an officer, he would have a car and would have what the Italian call a tendente, which is like a servant, and obviously a soldier, but he would work as a servant for the officer that would maybe drive the car or do things for him, clean, polish his boots and whatever. And so with his sidekick, they were going around basically stealing stuff from farmers and so on in Greece. So I hope any Greek listeners are not going to take notes and come to my house. They want the money back, whatever, 80 years later. But the thing was, he said one thing, that they looked like in these paddocks, they look at these pigs and they saw this little piglet. So he went there and got this piglet. And as he was carrying the piglet back to his car, he had all these pigs coming towards him because the piglet was squealing. And these huge pigs coming towards him. And he said it was quite scary. Now, this is a man that obviously was quite used to stress. So what did he do? What do you think he did?
Shot all of them.
No, he shot the piglet.
Oh, to shut it up.
So he shot the piglet with his revolver, and he said, as soon as the piglet stopped squealing, all the pigs just
dispersed,
went their own way, and so on. So we were very impressed. Because obviously, what do? You panic, you let the piglet out, and then probably the pigs are still going. So that was my father. So for us, it was a bit of a legend, but obviously with a checkered past. So after the war, I got a job as an assistant, if you like, or a helper of, and I'm sure through family connections, of a Jewish man that had been appointed by, I assume, partly by the American, but also by the new Italian political establishment, as the man in charge of rebuilding the steel industry in Italy. Jews in Italy, a lot of them have names, like surnames are towns or cities. So Senigallia is a place in the Marche, so on the east coast of central Italy and so on. So his name was Oscar Senigallia. And one of the reasons why this man had been appointed was, first of all, because he was a very clever businessman, obviously Jewish, so he would have had support of the American Jewish lobby, but he would have used the money that came from the United States through the Marshall Plan. Have you ever heard of the Marshall Plan? General Marshall. General Marshall was the Secretary of State, I think, in the last Roosevelt administration, maybe also the Truman administration. I hope I'm not saying too many I make too many errors, so people would be correcting me. But the Marshall Plan was an extraordinary thing, which shows you the difference in the moral thing between the current American leadership and the former American leadership. because basically they use American taxpayers' money to rebuild the industries of the defeated countries, Japan, Germany, and Italy. So Japan, Germany, and Italy, they were the enemies. They had been not just defeated, destroyed by the Americans, had the opportunity of rebuilding the industry via American loans. Very, very substantial loans.
It's pretty smart, really.
It's pretty smart, but that shows you how things should be done, rather than antagonize and like the tariffs or what we are dealing with now. And my late father always said that Italy should have dedicated squares and things to this General Marshal, was because of the communist influence in Italy, there was never a public and official acknowledgement of the enormous support that the American taxpayers had made to rebuild the industry. Having said that, what that meant is that my late father basically was involved very early on in the rebuilding of the steel industry in Italy. And to be fair, he was quite clever, because he reinvented himself after his career in the steel industry as a botanist, of all things, from nothing. And so gradually, so if you Google his name, you find that he became a world expert in peonies, which are the most beautiful flowers that you ever, I don't know if you ever seen the peonies. Well, peonies are like a super roses, and so there are 2 varieties of peonies that carry his name, because he actually discovered them in China. In China, yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he reinvented himself and had a reasonably good life, retiring very early in a way. He could have been completely destroyed and become very depressed and bitter and twisted about the fact that he wasn't, and he was quite an adjusted man. When I sort of divorced from my second wife, my now former second wife called me, said, "You are a selfish arsehole like your father," she said to me. So
they know how to stick it in, don't they?
So she tried to insult not just me, but also my ancestors, my genetic background. But so selfish arsehole. Well, my father was definitely selfish. I don't know if you can call him an arsehole, but I imagine if you're really selfish, maybe you are an arsehole. But I'm sure my 2 former wives will call me arsehole and selfish. But you have to feel comfortable in your own skin, which basically means that then the transition to selfishness is really quite quick.
Yeah.
The other thing that we discovered, and I'm sure you have discovered, and that's probably why you do this thing, is that you have to do things that can be useful for other people, and so on. So there you go.
Can you tell me, was there ever a stage that you ever saw your father? Because I want to bring this watch in. Because
the Rolex, yes.
This is a really special watch, though, guys. This is not just any Rolex. So this is a late 50s Submariner.
It's an old Rolex. So the Rolex, I understand, was given to me, given to him by my late mother after I was born. So I was born in 1956, so it had to be probably 1957 or around that time. So
we reckon it's 58, around that time.
Yeah, every 58. Now, the memories, I have many memories of him wearing a Rolex, and he would use it as a sport watch. You have to remember, and I don't
what
want to
kind of sport? What when you say sports,
water sports.
Yeah.
He was a very good swimmer.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that maybe people will find, I was listening to you before, so you're not the most politically correct. So
I'm not.
That's what I know. So as you know, I'm probably even less politically correct than you are. So I can tell all these anecdotes that people, hopefully they don't get too offended. And if they do,
don't listen.
Bad luck. It's like Ricky Gervais, bad luck. But the thing is that he told us, so he was a very good swimmer, and he would have done some competitive swimming in the years, like in his teens. And obviously at the time, and even now, the Hungarians are very good swimmers. And so Hungary was then quite an important Central European nation. To a point, maybe not as much these days. And I have a feeling that he might have had his first sexual experience in Budapest, because he always told us, he drilled us the Hungarian women are by far the
best.
most beautiful and the best. And I said, why this fixation with Hungarian women? So he would have been to Budapest for some competition, a swimming competition, and so and I hope I'm not.
It's a real lover, isn't it?
So I've been waiting for these Hungarian women. Where are they? But it's true, because I have been to Budapest. Maybe I was with my wife, so I didn't have to a lot of opportunity to explore the issues of the other sex.
I was going to say, this is maybe why you jumped onto
the thing is that they have this combination, because beauty comes, like most things, from a blend. You don't get beauty by being, what do you call it, mating people the same sort of, they get boring individuals. So in order to have beauty, like the Brazilians, and in a way also the Italians modestly, because you get these various influences. And so the Hungarians have this strange combination, because they have the Slavish, but almost like Eastern European, like almost Asian. So they can be, you have these beautiful women with dark hair and almost olive skin, but with very regular features. Anyway, so we spent a lot of time in the water.
So he needed a waterproof watch.
So he would use the Rolex for...
so your mum would have walked in and said, I need a watch for my husband to swim with or get wet.
Yeah, but you have to remember that for modestly, if you like, privileged Italians, Rolex was not considered a fancy watch.
It wasn't, no, you're right.
It was considered a sort of a middle of the road sport watch. It was probably the first, and you correct me because obviously you're a scholar, I'm just making it up as I go, but my impression was that the Rolex was one of the early sports watches. The watches were not sporty, and generally if you played sport you wouldn't use a watch. You would not. But the Rolex had this idea, obviously whoever was behind the Rolex, whoever was,
Mr.
engineer, yes, to have if you like, a sport watch. And then gradually the market and the cleverness of the Swiss made them, but for us, for my generation, and I think I mentioned to Kent before, the elegant watches were the Patek Philippe, the Vacheron Constantin, maybe, what else, the Piaget, Cartier, and so on. But Patek Philippe was the standard if you wanted to have a good watch to wear. So Rolex was not considered a fancy watch. And in fact, I got a watch, a Rolex, when I finished my university thing, and I told Kent I had a Sea Dweller, so that's 1980, that I gave to my eldest son, Alexander. So Alexander has my Sea Dweller.
So 1665, which we just showed everybody.
That's right, and he was very happy because obviously he looks at the internet and he knows how much it was valued. With this one, I never really looked at the price. This is obviously for me, because I will never sell it anyway. This is for me is my one of my... This is a
$35,000, $40,000 watch.
Yeah, okay, well, good for you.
Maybe a bit more.
Yeah.
But I want to show everybody at home, this is unbelievable. So we reckon this is a 1958, which I'm pretty sure it is. It's either a 5508 or it's a 6563, but I'm pretty on the mark with a 5508. But I want you to have a look at this. So this is original dial, original hands, and original bezel, and original bracelet. So you can see the marks on the bezel. Original crown. So the crown just had an underline under the Rolex logo. You can also see how the bezel's gone a little bit of like a bronzy color. That's all normal for a watch of this era. Some of the Sea Dwellers as well in the 1665 double reds and stuff, they sort of faded out a little bit. That's just patina, so don't think that's, you know, aftermarket or been changed or anything. The aluminium bezel there's lifting just a tad.
Thanks.
But this has some stories which also has been telling us. You can imagine what his father would have done wearing this watch. And it's lasted all these years as well, like for the condition. Have you ever had it serviced?
I think he would have, not me.
Not you?
He would have
had it serviced. So just I want to bring back the PCG. So this is the upgrade. So what Rolex did. So no crown guard. Obviously they needed a crown guard. They needed to protect that crown, so they went up a little bit more there. You can see the writing on the dial. They went from 100 meter to 200 meters. If you look at the gilt dial here on the 5508, you can see that the depth rating is actually done in white, which they changed it to all gilt on a later model there, but still got Submariner written on the dial. I believe some of the first editions didn't even have Submariner written on the dial. But that shows there an upgrade. All right, we have a few years in between, I understand that, but isn't it beautiful just to see these two? And the thickness of the cases. Look how thin the 5508 is. And the glass, both riveted bracelets. But they had to beef up the Submariner. They had to give it the extra 100 meters, needed a thicker case. It needed a protection around the crown. Thanks for that. That's unbelievable. What a beautiful watch. I mean, you must have been stoked to have that given to you by your dad.
No.
No?
But it is a little bit more elegant than the Sea Dweller, because the Sea Dweller is too big.
Thick, yeah.
And this is actually thin. And so it's actually quite comfortable to wear.
When you're working, has anybody ever noticed that on your wrist when you've been working?
I don't really.
Oh, you don't wear it?
I wear it occasionally. So yes, my friend Tim, that is the reason why I'm here, had seen it, and I think he is also very interested in watches. The reason why I have it is because it was my father's, or my type of, in my education and my upbringing, that we could have had was cufflinks. I imagine studs when you wear a dinner jacket, and watches. Now, the fancy watches in my upbringing were actually, what do you call it, watches that you...
Pocket watches.
Pocket watches. And so my late father always had a Movado. The Movado, you know, the Movado that you open, sort of like a little square box and you open it. So that was his normal watch. So he would have a Movado, and then he had a very, very fancy watch, which unfortunately I think my late mother lost. Very fancy. I don't know what it would have been, but fantastic gold watch that you open and had the ding, 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 dong, 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 and he would wear it like in the evening if you went out and so on. So that was his normal watches. He would never actually wear a wristwatch. So a wristwatch was considered a sporty and almost a working man watch, not a gentleman's watch.
Correct.
So a gentleman watch would have a pocket watch, and he had a number of pocket watches, and some quite extravagant with these big chains, with all these little things, almost like these women that have all these bracelets with all this, so like you will have a little horn, so if you go in hunting and you kill something, you had like a little tooth of a, not tiger, because I'm not talking about Ernest Hemingway, but talking about European type of thing. So with all these little ornaments and sort of like souvenirs on your big chain.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool. And then with the gold chain for the gold watch, you have some sort of almost like a weight on the other end to balance, and so to put it, so because the chain will be in front, and so you have a pocket on one side, but then you will have the end of the chain on the other side, and you can secure it, but you will have something. So generally it would have been an old coin, and so you will have this old coin, and because he had this passion for owls, he will have an old coin with an owl, like an ancient Greek coin and so on. Now if you say, what happened to all this? Well, number one, I came to Australia when I was relatively young, so I missed out on a lot of stuff that obviously my brothers took care of.
You were born in Italy? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then
I grew up in Italy, so I came in my 20s.
Okay,
I was
that's
early
good,
20s. Yeah. And so basically, you know, my father had a very long life. When he came to the crunch, all these trinkets and things went otherwise. I did get a few trinkets, apart from the watch, and a couple of nice cufflinks, which I didn't bring today. But the thing was that then, because of my divorces, you lose a little bit also with your divorces. And so it's very hard. I can give very good advice on family law and also on how to prepare for the exit.
Guys, that was part one of Orso's clip. If you enjoyed that, please stay tuned for next week, where we're going to do episode 2. Orso's brought along some fantastic watches, especially a vintage 5508, which you've got to see again. So I appreciate that. And he's also going to give you some advice on family law and some tips. So stay tuned. If you like tonight's episode, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon.